Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here on time. Well, we are going to close the year with a bang. I am super excited about today's webinar. It's been something that we have been discussing in inpatient health for, well, actually for about 3 years, but more seriously for since really the beginning of this year. And part of the reason for that is, of course, because we ran a couple of other sessions, Musk Pharma, Trump Pharma, designed to provoke you and perhaps consider alternative ways of thinking about our industry. Well, my own team was only really happy to focus on those topics if we could also focus on this one. And this one is, of course, called Greta Pharma. And it's a thought experiment, a very important thought experiment, because the idea that Greta Thunberg would audit and indeed hold up a mirror to our industry is a fictional one, but it's the sort of standard that I think that we need to be willing to hold ourselves to. And I'm super, super happy that nearly 300 of you have signed up and that we are going to go beyond the blah, 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 as Greta herself would say, on health and climate. We know it's important. We know that there are increasing levels of scrutiny and prominence applied by leaders, by grassroots levels within our company. But I think that the reason we chose Greta is because she famously sees a lot of the talk as hot air, quite literally. And I think it is absolutely the case that we need to see what's behind the curtain, what's actually happening, and what really needs to happen in order to move it a step further from where it is today. And I'm so, so glad that I'm going to be able to introduce a stellar panel to you. It was actually hard to choose who not to put on the panel for this session, such is the passion levels in certain groups for this topic, and super, super glad. So look, you've probably been to one of my webinars before, and if that is the case, you know that by now you should have introduced yourself. So find that chat window. I can see 8 of you have written in the chat window already. I want you to tell us who you are, where you're calling in from, why it is that you're here, if you can, what it is that you think that we need to focus on in this conversation. And I want everybody listening to be able to introduce themselves. And once they've done so, to remember that this should not be a one-way conversation. In fact, you could argue that this topic will never see the impact that it needs to if it's a one-way conversation. It has to be something where we try and collaborate, try and find points of consensus, try and find points of difference so that we can debate and discuss how we overcome those. And I myself will be certainly looking to see who contributes to this important conversation. I want to start with Greta's own words. I was actually I've been recently studying the science of provocation, something that is not really studied, if I'm honest. And I was actually comparing the famous speeches of different individuals, JFK's Put a Man on the Moon, MLK's I Have a Dream. And interestingly, Greta Thunberg's talk at the UN, which you can see in front of you right now, is the most provocation per word talk that I think has ever been given. It was literally coming out on my mathematical scores as a factor of double anything else. And you can see why. It's a very compact, only 500-word talk that she gave. My message is that we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school. I'll let you read the rest. I don't need to read for you. But I do want to use her words as a reminder of the fact she takes no prisoners, of the fact that we cannot hide, and the fact that this is the level of scrutiny, the standard that we need to hold ourselves to, even if it's super uncomfortable. So this is the first half of the talk. I'm going to just move now to the second half. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual? We will never forgive you. You can see that I've highlighted that in bold later on. So the point of today is to indeed, recognize that we're unlikely to be at this level. That's where we are. Let's be honest. But what is still performative, and what is real? What is actually making progress? Where should we start? If we're going to invest anywhere, where should it be? We want to move beyond just the ESG standard. We want to move beyond just making a publicity campaign around all of this. Maybe the publicity is one important element of it, but it certainly isn't all of it. And really, what are the actual needle-moving things that we need to do as an industry? What is it? Is it climate risk? Is it pollution? Is it inequality? Is it the social contract that we have with our patients that needs our attention? And what could the roadmap look forwards be? Let me introduce some wonderful people to you. So Drew is actually going to take over from me. That's right, I'm finally taking the back seat. Many of you have wished for that moment for quite some time, but he will be chairing today's session. He's someone who I got to know at our first Pharmageddon event about 3 years ago, and who I immediately had a lot of admiration for. He's obviously a leader in medical at Bayer, but he proactively made sure that this was a vital agenda point in Bayer's current transformation process that you've probably heard of. He's got a lot of leadership experience across Bayer, but also at GSK and BMS. He's led a lot of major programs, Xarelto, HIV, and he's obviously an industry pioneer. And for that, we are super glad that he's willing to join this. Elena is someone who I've got to know pretty well over the last couple of years, and I am super pleased. Probably the most golden-hearted person I know in pharma. She's an experienced healthcare communications leader, got a couple of decades experience, mainly specializing in medical affairs, but she's also delivered on the global publications front, international meetings, multi-channel, omni-channel communications, and of course she is the co-founder of Salve Health, who are doing some very good work, let me just put it that way, in our industry, and I encourage you to look at it a little more. She is a collaborator and in many ways a friend and colleague of Emma, the next person on my list, who joined Bayer again under Drew's leadership, but doing what she says is her dream job, actually being able to power forward and focus on this from within a pharmaceutical company. That is super exciting. That Emma, you are undoubtedly the right person for that job, but the fact that the job was created in the first place, and indeed that you've been pursuing it now for over a year, I think, right, is so fantastic. So really pleased to see you. Bert is someone who I've known for quite a few years, and originally just picked up on him as an enlightened person working within clinical trials in J&J Clinical Innovation at the time, and just a pioneer across every level. But when he told me about some of the work that he was doing both locally and regionally to advance sustainability within the R&D area in areas that I hadn't even considered important before, I realized just what a pioneer he was, going against the grain for the greater good across multiple initiatives, and done some great stints at Digital Medicine Society recently, and is of course forging out on his own. Just a great collaborator and person to have in our industry. Shirley is someone who I've only got to know very recently. She's the co-founder of PM Life Sciences Consulting, but I've heard such good things and such good progress that she is proactively making that we couldn't stop her being part of this webinar either. She's a doctor in life sciences leader. She's working at the intersection of medicine, tech, and societal impact. And she's got experience across our industry in policy development and medical as well. And she's a really passionate educator, I think is one way of putting her. She lectures in higher education, but is absolutely bringing this topic to the fore. And I look forward to some of her education in the next hour or so. So listen, guys, you might remember that when you signed up for today's webinar, you also answered a question, a registration question. You can see it written at the top of this slide. Which of these truly describes your organization's real stance on climate and sustainability and health equity today? Well, before I show you the answers of that question, what I'm actually going to do, and this might sound a bit counterintuitive, but I'm going to launch a brand new question. The reason is because I want to be able to see the results of this by the time I've finished my little intro conversation with you all. So if you look at the your screen now, you'll see two new questions have actually arrived on screen, and I need you to answer those right now. Number one, which statement best reflects your view of pharma sustainability reality today? And then the second one, lower down, how urgent do you believe climate and equity pressures will feel inside pharma by 2030? That's obviously only just over 4 years from now. So, yeah, I will let you answer those. I'll hold that open for a couple of minutes. So let's have a look at the results of what you did when you joined the webinar. So what is this big gray 43.2%? Well, it's the kind of the middle option. It influences decisions when trade-offs allow. A bit of a strong caveat there, isn't there? So, it's there, but is it at the top of the list? Probably not, is basically the way of describing that. What were the other ones? Well, let's see. 29%, nearly 30%, it actively shapes core commercial and medical decisions. That was the top option. So that's encouraging. 22%, the other side of it. It appears in goals, but rarely changes choices. Nearly a quarter of the vote there. Well, interestingly, this tiny little blue segment was perhaps the most endearing, because these were the people who said it's just mostly optics and communications rather than actual operations. So maybe there's something to be encouraged with there. Not quite Greta standard, of course, but something. So the next question was this one. If your team did face a Greta-style audit tomorrow, which of the areas would be most exposed? So you can see a big polarizing result here, more than half the vote. What did it go to? Travel, congresses, and field force activity. So the business of HQ, the operational day, the medical meetings that we have very much brought back since the pandemic ended. And indeed, I think we can see that. Supply chain footprint and environmental impact, only 21% of the vote. I actually thought that would be higher. We would withstand most scrutiny across most areas, getting 13%. So that's people giving themselves a clean bill of health. And then digital data and evidence choices getting the final 10%. So hopefully interesting stuff. Right, before I hand over to the panel, let me end the poll. Thank you to, nearly all of you answered it. That is what I like to see. Good to see everyone's still awake. This is an important topic after all. Let's have a look at the results. So beliefs, it will show in a minute. Sorry, Zoom can be a little tardy sometimes these days. Here we go. So which statement best reflects? Again, it's a bit that normal distribution, isn't it? Similar to the registration question. The industry is trying, but progress is mostly performative, getting half the vote there. Materially off track and knows it, only 15% though. So interesting there. 2% of people saying there's no need to focus on sustainability. Interesting. You're probably not in the right room. How urgent do you believe climate and equity pressure will feel inside pharma by 2030? Again, over half the vote. They will reshape some decisions, but not the core model. So it's creeping in. Basically, on a Greta-style audit, we'd score pretty low because the bar is very high. The bar is very high for her. A couple of quick notices. Everyone talking is going to be representing themselves today. They're not representing their companies necessarily. Yes, we are recording today's session. You don't need to ask me for it. I will send it to you post-event. And of course, let's make this a dialogue. Let's make this a multi-way conversation. Now, let me ask the panel to turn on their cameras and really for Drew to take away the rest of the conversation. I am going to lurk in the background and I will continue to throw up these poll questions during the time that we have here. Okay, so I've got about 4 additional polls that will appear. I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer them each time, but then it's up to Drew to decide whether or not the answers will be shown or not. So Drew, that's up to you. Let me hand over to you. The platform is yours.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Impatient Health, for giving us this platform. Now, for those of you that were attracted to this event by the nightmare before Christmas advertising, I hope actually you'll stay to engage in that. This pitched nightmare is actually quite the opposite. We aim to demonstrate that in a way that you're looking forward to, many of you looking forward to the Christmas opportunity and gather around a warming fire and engage in open debate and have arguments over board games, that actually this chance for this discussion is actually a really heartwarming opportunity, and even I would go so far as to say an ethical imperative for what we as an industry need to do. So whilst it's unlikely that Greta will be joining the C-suite of any pharma company anytime soon, she really, as Paul introduced, she really lit a fire in a pretty profound way with her words, and on a movement that directly impacts what we do now and what we believe we should do in the future. So actually, it's really the season of giving. So we aim to give you the gift of curiosity, of ideas, of new perspectives, and ultimately a call to action. One where we aim to highlight why it's important. And really, there's pretty strong data now to show that tens of millions of lives are at risk if we don't act on the health impacts of climate change. And that it is possible to shift the narrative from profit over everything to profit in balance with people and planet, and something that we really need to lean into. So I've really got the pleasure of facilitating this discussion with my colleagues and experts, Emma, Elena, Bert, and Shirley. And thank you very much for joining. And I think we've already started with some good insights from those polls to really show that I think if it was an end of year school report, I think it's a could do better scenario. And so I'd like to start the discussion really by asking the panel, why do you think this is important, and really what's at stake here? And I'm gonna turn the first question over to Emma, and then please, as a panel, please feel free to interrupt each other, to disrupt each other, and to share your thoughts as why is it important? So Emma, why do you think this is such an important topic?
Thanks for the question, Drew. And I see that Matt has already put in the chat that I'm a tour de force, so I hope I can live up to that claim. But you know what? Climate change is a living reality, and it's not only affecting those people that live under socioeconomically deprived circumstances, it's affecting everyone all around the world. And we're on track to have about 2 degrees of warming within our lifetimes, and that's going to have massive impact on human health. The World Economic Forum estimates that climate change is going to cause about 14.5 million deaths by 2050. And that's going to cost us in terms of healthcare costs and also economic losses. Let's take an example of cardiovascular disease, for example, which is something that I've been looking into recently at Bayer. Already causing about a third of the deaths globally. But under a global warming situation, we're likely to see increasing mortality and increasing incidence and prevalence. And that's because we're seeing more and more heat waves, and the Lancet Commission Climate and Health is showing that mortality is already climbing. It's climbed over the last 5 years, and that will continue over the foreseeable future. So you could say, well, what does all of that have to do with the pharma industry? Well, the answer is quite a lot, to be honest. If we are an industry that truly does what we say we do, which is to improve public health, we can't ignore this any longer. So I think for all of those reasons, for me, it's a no-brainer. We have to do this. So I'll let one of my co-panel members come in next.
Let me build on that. Oh, sorry, Elena, you go.
I was going to say, I was listening this morning to BBC Radio 4's Reith Lectures by a historian, and he was talking about moral ambition. And I think that just says exactly what Emma has alluded to, that we actually have a moral imperative, but it is a moral ambition to do more in this area in pharma. And there's more we can do, and we hope to tell you a little bit about what we can do, and that the future is perhaps brighter than we think. But go on, you go.
Thank you. Let me kind of position myself in between the moral ambition and the public health and how climate is gonna change that. I've spent my career in clinical R&D, developing new medicines and trying to find ways for people to improve their quality of life, to learn to live with disease, to offer people hope. when disease could really affect people's life and the environments they're finding themselves in. And it wasn't until digital health came into being with digital health solutions that I realized that by doing all this R&D, we are also contributing a lot of waste to the environment, and we're actually doing damage to the planet as a result of that. And then I started thinking, how can we focus on people's health and try to give people a better future when we don't do the same for the planet and actually do damage to the planet? How can you live a healthy life on a planet that is sick and getting sicker? So what would it look like to balance the two, the planet and the people? And isn't that part of our remit, that to give people a better life, you also need to take into consideration the impact on the planet? And I'm looking forward to share some of those experiences and actions we can take to find that balance between planet and people.
And maybe then just to come in and add a couple more thoughts. I think for me there's two things. One is this has moved from something that's, you know, a crisis event or unusual events happening to actually this is impacting daily healthcare. So what patients need, how they access their treatments, and how they interact with healthcare. So it's not a remote thing. The other thing, building on the activism point, is, you know, I listen to stuff about activism, and actually everybody's skills and talents are needed when you're going to make a change. So even if people say, oh, I don't know very much about the climate or don't understand, actually we need everybody's got a role to play in this. So it's brilliant that we've got people, you know, listening here, and I'm really keen to learn as much as I can from this discussion and what the audience say today as well.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm hearing that it's you know, over the last years, there's often been small parts of an organization, a pharma company, where maybe it was our responsibility to focus on sustainability topics, but it's becoming ever more present and clear that it needs to be much more than just a CSR or, you know, public relations exercise. It needs to be much more integrated across our business. So I've got another question actually for you know, many of these topics around climate change and health and sustainability. There's this terminology of adaptation and mitigation. And so do you think we are needing to adapt more or mitigate more based on the you know, the temperature changes, based on where we are as an industry? What do you think is the most important thing? Is it adaptation? Is it mitigation? And actually, quite frankly, how do we even define those? What do we mean when we talk about adaptation and mitigation?
So maybe I could jump in, Drew, and have the first stab at answering that question, which is a really good one. So it's not an either-or situation. I'll say that up front. We need to do both. We really need to mitigate, and we also need to adapt. So what does it mean to mitigate? Well, it means that we need to reduce our carbon emissions across our value chain. It means that we need to do much less harm in terms of environmental damage, and therefore also protect future health outcomes. That's a given. Most businesses have made commitments around how they want to reduce their carbon emissions, and that should be well in progress for the majority now of pharmaceutical businesses. Can we go faster? Yes, definitely. So I think particularly for those of us within the medical part of the organisation who understand the connection between carbon emissions equals poor health outcomes, we need to be advocating for that to happen at speed and as efficiently and effectively as possible. Then on the other side of the coin is adaptation, and this is becoming increasingly important in parallel with mitigation. As I mentioned at the beginning, the world is not on track in terms of meeting the Paris Agreement. We are already exceeding 1.5 degrees of warming. We're going to go up to 2 degrees of warming, even with the best will in the world. So that means that the health impacts of climate change are already being felt in many parts of the world, and that will increase over time. And therefore, the burdens being placed on healthcare systems that are already stretched because of population growth, because of an increasing elderly demographic, And especially those people that live with specific vulnerabilities, like maybe they live in poverty or have outdoor occupations and therefore exposed to heat. There's an urgent need to address some of those health impacts on the ground from today. And it's our role within the industry to support health systems to become more resilient in the future. And that's what adaptation means. And there's so much more that we could do in the adaptation space. And I'd like to emphasize adaptation, not because I think it's more important than mitigation, it's just as important, but it's a topic that I just don't think we've even touched the surface of when it comes to the role of the pharmaceutical industry. And that's what I'd like to change. I want to drive more conversation on this topic, and I want more people like us within Bayer and other outstanding organizations that are leading the way to do more in that space. So that's how I'd like to lead the conversation, and I'll see now if there's someone else that wants to come and disagree with me. Or
can I just point out what Alex has put in the chat around the current situation and the consequences, and saying that we need to focus on new tech as well as enacting mitigation actions as well. So I sense that, grounded by some good data there. Thank you, Alec. That actually we need to do both. And actually, maybe some areas we really need to dial up, and some areas where we haven't focused.
And would you say
anybody else want to come in on that?
We were just chatting about relevance to your role as well. And obviously, pharma is so broad, but where you have an impact on your role is going to dictate whether you're able to impact mitigation or adaptation. So on the comms side, where I am in medical affairs, that is going to be much more about adaptation. Perhaps things like new diseases that we've got vectors moving north for vector-borne disease. We're going to need new treatments for that. We have in the cardiovascular space that is going to be impacted by more frequent heat events. So what are we doing where you have a cardiovascular portfolio to support awareness with HCPs, with patients, and build that into your medical strategy or commercial strategy?
Yeah, can I come in here? I am interested in this. So one of the things that, I did medical affairs, sort of standard medical affairs for many, many years. And I don't think if I'm truthful, I never really looked at the bits in the patient information leaflet and SPC about storage conditions. So I was kind of focusing on the markets, the populations that tended to be in higher income countries, and it was tablets, and someone else had done all the formulation and the clever stability stuff, and that was all fine. I would now argue that thinking about the adaptation bit, and as we're talking, any medical affairs professional should really be understanding their patient pathways and what happens when a patient actually, gets diagnosed, decides with their doctor to have some treatment, etc., how they're living with their condition and their treatment, and actually then thinking about, is that treatment fit for that environment in which it's going to be used, be that, and if it's a medicine that has to be kept at a low temperature, and actually what's happening to the average temperatures in the countries that you're serving, as an example of sort of that widening of thinking, to really think more broadly about what is it we're trying to do when we say we're serving patients, and how do we adapt our thinking and our practice of our daily work to that, as an example of sort of the difference of thinking that I think we ought to be embracing.
Yeah, 100%. The patient pathways, and we're not alone there. Many hospitals have started thinking about green versions of patient pathways. And they've started thinking about what would it look like when we do a care pathway, more specific, in a green fashion. Does it mean that we accommodate for patients who are subject to temperature changes, so they may present differently? Does it mean that we offer remote monitoring as opposed to traveling to the clinic and wasting the fossil fuels and what have you? So for us, in terms of relationship with our stakeholders in the hospitals, to be able to talk about green versions of healthcare, to be able to talk about adaptation to climate change, gives us a seat at the table. It's another topic where we can work together to see how we can design for the future. And in a more technical fashion, hospitals are subject to the same metrics from the Paris Agreement as we are as companies. So we need to realize that for hospitals, for their scope 2 and 3 emission, we are part of that scope 2 and 3. We are part of the systems they need to report on. So if we don't understand what role we play, how much we contribute, we're not a talking partner. We're not a conversation partner. We can't collaborate on this. So in terms of relationship management with our stakeholders, I think it's on us to understand what is happening on the hospital side, and how we can contribute to designing those solutions and replicate successes, especially in international company setup. What we learn in one country may benefit discussions in other countries. So there's a lot to it in how we can continue to do our job effectively.
Great. So I think that whilst we've been talking, there was a poll ongoing, and I would ask if Paul or Lorna, if you could show the results, because I think this sets an interesting baseline for where we think we're at, where we think we're underprepared, and some interesting results around the gaps, which talk a little bit to what we've touched on around, where we can individually make a difference, and as an industry where we think the areas are where we're least prepared. I think it's interesting, almost a third of the participants say all are unprepared or unmotivated, with then international travel and Congress being a significant proportion in the supply chain, manufacturing and packaging, slightly lower, which, similar to what Paul said, I'm quite surprised that that's so low. So I think it's clear to me, at least, that there's a wide spread of different views, and also at all parts of our value chain we feel we're not making a significant enough contribution. Don't know if any of the panel have got any thoughts on those poll results.
Well, I think maybe we're not doing justice to people's intrinsic motivation. I think it's a system problem. What I've learned since we started talking about sustainability, circularity, green targets, what I've learned is that people in recruitment processes are very much attracted to this type of conversation. So new people joining the industry are very sensitized to this type of thinking. How do we adapt to climate change? What can we do to mitigate the impact on the planet? The reason it's not being talked about is that you don't see it reflected in goals and objectives. There are no incentives for any of this behavior. I think the motivation is there. We just need to channel it to allow people to actually act on it. And the moment we start creating those incentives, those goals, those measures, I think we can see tremendous energy released to actually work towards those goals.
Yeah, maybe I'd just like to come in on that. I'm sort of nodding in the background here, because I guess I just want to share a little bit of my experience from working this year in a role in which I have sort of permission to do this work, actually, within a very large organisation. And what I have found is that people are willing to give their own time completely free of charge to support you on the mission. We've actually grown the team phenomenally fast this year, just because there's so many passionate, purpose-driven individuals that want to contribute to this space of climate change and how it's affecting human health and health equity. And I'd say in particular, we've attracted some extremely high quality, very young, talented individuals to the team who I have to say it's absolute pleasure to work with, because I'm just learning so much from them. I think that this topic does require a slightly different mindset, perhaps from the usual one that we see within the pharmaceutical industry, or perhaps it's a mindset that we can all learn to adopt over time. But I do think that we need to be a little bit visionary, or a lot visionary in some cases. We have to be quite brave. At a certain point we can talk about all of this stuff, but in Greta-style we just need to get on and do it, and that requires good leadership, to take a risk, to take that leap of faith, to just get on with it, even if it's not clear yet what the business value is, even if it's not obvious how you're going to do it. You just get on and you do it. So you kind of need that mindset of, I'm going to take this risk and we'll try a bunch of things, and some of them are going to work and some of them aren't going to work. But honestly, it is the most purpose-driven work I have ever done within the industry. And I think people are generally hungry for this type of work. I think we're tired of platitudes. I think we're tired of saying that we're doing the things that we're not doing. And I think this is where we get to put our money where our mouth is. And there is opportunity here. And there is also a risk that if we don't embrace this topic as an industry, then we won't be relevant in tomorrow's world. So I think, for example, the World Economic Forum have estimated we need to invest about 65 billion US dollars over the next 5 to 8 years if we want to innovate to tackle climate-related health conditions. That's doable. It's 5% of what we spend as an industry. So it's doable. We just need to do it, and we're not. So I think I'm speaking from frustration, but I'm also speaking from a place of opportunity that's out there if we choose to take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for looking at ways we can reduce our carbon footprint. There's also other ways we can actually better integrate these topics into our business strategies so that we are designing, developing products that are going to be climate resilient, that we are meeting the needs of future populations in areas of extreme heat or other impacts of climate change. So I think there's several different things other than going far beyond just what we think are being good citizens and not taking long haul flights and not visiting face-to-face conferences all the time, but it's something a lot more that can be done. And I sense that there's other people, and as you said, Emma, there's lots of people willing to invest their time and effort, but at the moment it hasn't been fully integrated into a lot of our business strategies. So I don't know if Bert or Shirley or Elena, you've got any other thoughts on that of how we can then start to better integrate into our business.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's really important to, I mean, we've got, as you say, we've got lots of people with lots of passion and ideas, and how do you allow them to question the status quo? And, it's like, oh, but we do that because you have to do it for regulatory reasons or because the internal company SOP says so. And actually, how do we allow people to say, well, is that really true? And the example I'm thinking of from healthcare is actually the ongoing work around whether you need PPE. So there's this campaign, the gloves are off, and I think there's a week in May each year in the NHS where they actually say, do healthcare professionals actually understand when you need to put on disposable gloves to do a procedure versus when it's okay to just wash your hands and do the procedure, and really so that people aren't using disposable gloves when they don't need to. But actually thinking about that, that's quite a brave set of thinking to say, oh, we'll move from disposable gloves, which feels right, to actually say, no, we won't use it. We'll rely on the hand washing. And obviously they've had to sort of go back to the data and really sort of say, what are the protocols? And I think there's a lesson in that for us, in that which of the things are we doing that are wearing gloves when we don't, metaphorically wearing disposable gloves when we don't need to, because someone once told us that's what you need to do. And how do we uncover that thinking within the industry? And there'll be bits we can decide within teams, within companies, that we go, yeah, that we don't need to do, or we do this differently. There'll be other bits where we have to work together as industry with regulators and say, actually, do we need to do that even more, anymore? Or is that just a piece of history? Sorry, Elena.
I was going to say, it is a behaviour change piece, though, isn't it, ultimately? And is the reason people are perhaps reticent to get more involved, or those items aren't embedded in strategy, is there is a perception of risk, or that somehow this can't be of benefit to a company that's had sort of profit at its core. But we were chatting before about the risk benefit, the opportunity, and Emma beautifully put it when she talked about the talent that she's been able to recruit to her team, and that's kind of one thing that we've seen as well. But yeah, I just wondered from the panel's point of view what you guys also thought what was the business case. What is the business case for more activity impact in this area for pharma?
Yeah. So I'm
I think
going to ask Paul, if you could show that poll beyond ESG, around the, if climate and equity constraints became non-negotiable, which commercial shift would happen first? So I think that's an interesting results here. We've got the reduced travel and different congress or meeting presence. I would challenge our group to say, surely we can do more than that. And that may be the first thing that will get tackled, but it's not necessarily the most impactful longer term. There must be other things that we can better integrate some climate topics into our portfolio choice. And I'm surprised actually that portfolio choice is guided by long-term societal burden is so low. So I don't know if you've got any initial reactions to that.
Yeah, I mean, I have. So one specific example, and a recent publication has shown that if we look at the risk factors for cardiovascular disease, the third ranked risk factor is actually exposure to poor air quality. And that is a more important risk factor than LDL cholesterol, than tobacco consumption, than other very traditional kind of metabolic individual level risk factors. So environmental drivers of disease are extremely important for many outcomes. And yet we're still not sort of paying attention to that. So one very simple thing that we could do tomorrow, which doesn't require any additional budget, any additional resource, is to actually integrate this environmental dimension into any education that we do to target health community professionals or even patients as well. When we think about health literacy, for example, that's defined as the ability to access, understand, appraise, and apply health information. That's usually a judgment concerning individuals, or at best populations of individuals. Now with this environmental dimension, what we need to do is we need to get better at looking at the benefit risk of different interventions at a kind of societal level or even a planetary level as well in terms of its environmental impacts. So there's a new skill that we need to build together, and I don't have all the answers. I don't exactly know how that's going to look, but I know that if we get a lot of very clever people like the ones on this call today in a room together, then we could figure it out. So we can start to integrate some of these topics into our medical symposium that we do at Congress, into our CME education programs. And that could be done from tomorrow. It's not actually a very difficult thing to do. It just requires a curious mindset to actually start to embrace this topic as being integral to the way that we deliver our products and our services to patients.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We need to understand the solutions we offer in terms of care pathways in a changing environment. And we also need to appreciate that some of these, especially younger clinicians in the healthcare systems, they come with expectations that we know or that we care because they were raised in that world where climate is very important. So it's one thing to know ourselves. It's another thing to be able to talk kind of peer to peer with these younger clinicians. And then very maybe more operational, when you talk to buyers in hospitals, these are the same people that buy from medtech companies. And there is no medtech product that is bought without understanding the environmental impact. That is a hard decision. It's a hard gate for being able to tender for medtech products. You need return processes. You need to understand the environmental impact. You need to understand how these can be reused, are they single use or are they, etc. So if anything, medtech is maybe showing us what the future can look like, where the buying process will change because hospitals will ask different questions. And if we're not prepared to answer those questions, then a competitor may actually outcompete us by having these answers available. So, I mean, competitiveness now is to be among the leaders to understand the impact. If you wait, you're probably going to find yourself behind, where either the field is ahead of you or your competition is ahead of you.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to the point about education and the risk factors, the point that Emma was making, because I think it's not just a symposium with clinicians, it's also internally as well, making sure that people who are working on say you're working on a particular condition and treatments for that everyone's given the support to actually stay up to date with the emerging information and data on, what are the risk factors for that condition? What is the latest information telling us about the interplay of environmental change and those risk factors, so that when you say, oh yes, I'm working on condition X and product Y, that you really are up to date and able to stay up to date as more information emerges, because that will also then help with the thinking of, so what do we need to be doing as a company?
Yeah, totally agree. And I was just going to throw in an extra point that even in an area like cardiovascular, these climate impacts are not going to affect everybody equally. So there are certain populations that are going to be disproportionately affected. Women, girls, and infants are absolutely going to be more disadvantaged than men potentially. And we need to factor that into perhaps trial design or analysis of the data as well.
Yeah, and Elena, since you mentioned patients and caregivers, there's an interesting comment in the chat where dermatologists are cited as an example, where they are already incorporating climate and health issues in their conferences. So they are already doing it. And we can only follow, and we should follow, and we should try catch up and get on par. I think that's a fantastic signal, and Marianne, thank you for sharing this, that the field is actually leading here. And we need to be able to contribute and answer to what extent we can help or not, but we need that clarity. We need to have the data to understand how our products fit in that thinking.
Yeah. Absolutely, thank you. So as I see, we're rapidly running out of time. But if I can just try to summarize what I've been hearing from the panel and our thoughts initially. So we've definitely got room to improve. We have got quite a low scoring on our progress so far, but all is not lost. There are lots of things we can do to tackle both adaptation and mitigation. But also we need to look at across the value chain, starting with the work that we do, what changes can we make and how can we build that roadmap. I also think, personally speaking, as well as reducing travel and some of those commonly known areas to actually reduce our carbon footprint, actually better integrating into our business strategies as something that we absolutely need to do in order for it to be long-term successful. So whether you work in R&D and you're identifying molecules, or you are developing products, how can there be climate resilient plans put in place for those products? Whether you work in medical affairs and you're actually doing medical education or identifying new study areas, how can you start shaping the business plans for those products to incorporate climate resilient activities, and whether that be education or evidence generation or communication, or whether you work in commercial as well, and actually how can you challenge the rest of the organization to do better, to do more, to improve the access to our medicines and improve health equity. I think each and every one of us can act within our own business areas, as well as those activities such as reducing travel and things which are commonly known. So lots we can do. And I think one of the polls that we've got, maybe we just do this final poll, have some comments around the roadmap, and then close with a call to action for the group. So maybe if we can show the poll around the roadmap, around the capability areas would matter most to build a long-term plan. Yeah, maybe if any of the panel have got any thoughts on this. So footprint level data, real operational transparency, 19%. Over half of you, though, are rating the governance with teeth, incentives tied to impact, not to optics. So I think that's a really interesting point, that you get what you measure, get what you're incentivized for, and I think it's actually around impact. I think that's a really important point. And so I don't know if any of you want to talk about incentives and why that is important. And at least with us and Bayer, I think the biggest incentive for me to work on this topic is actually our vision: health for all, hunger for none. And we've got quite a unique opportunity working in crop science, in consumer care, and also in pharmaceuticals that really touch a lot of these points. So that for me is my my sort of incentive and shining star, guiding star. But having governance with teeth and incentives that tied to impact, what does that mean to you? Maybe Emma, start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The incentives is a topic that we could probably spend a whole other hour on, and clearly we need a system in which the incentives are lining up well with our ability to impact public health outcomes and reduce health inequities globally. And I think if we're honest with ourselves and with each other, and we really look in the mirror on that question, currently the system doesn't incentivize us well to achieve that, if we're really honest with ourselves. That said, you know, in terms of the incentives that we're seeing at Bayer, there's masses of opportunity in terms of working with really high caliber academic institutions, public health bodies, philanthropic organizations who are, in today's global climate where there is limited finance for global health more generally, really looking now to the private sector to step up and to step in and to work together with these other important actors at a national and international level. Sometimes feels a bit lonely, to be honest, the work that we're doing at Bayer. There's plenty of room for others to join in. So if you would like to, then I think we're going to talk about joining Mosaic, and you can find out a bit more about that at the end of the call. But there's plenty of opportunity out there for everyone. So the incentives are already there. Honestly, for those of us that are bold enough to go, then come with us.
Yeah, I would just say as a B Corp, we've got kind of impact assessment built into our certification. So we have to fill in the B impact assessment across all areas of ESG. And that really does hold you accountable for looking at your business model and your business operations through that lens at every point in your business decision making.
Yeah, and I would look at incentives top down. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for leadership to call this out and to make sure business decisions are based on planetary impact as well as profit impact. That would be an easy one to check and to put a measure on and etc. But the flip side would be to allow people to come up with ideas to do better. I think the best opportunity for people to feel rewarded and recognized is when you listen to the ideas they have and when you allow them to act on those ideas. And when the environment is clear, the environment where the ideas would be enacted upon, that it needs to help the business move forward in this context of healthy people on a healthy planet. I think you'll be amazed what people can come up with, ideas they may have been sitting on, ideas they may generate together. I think there's tremendous opportunity for a bottom-up contribution, as well as a leadership imperative to add the dimension to decision making.
I think I'd just add, get started. There are organisations already doing stuff. You know, like borrow, steal from the ideas there, rather than sort of spending 3 years creating a governance structure and incentives. Actually, just do something.
Yeah. And I see Paul's posted another a question in the chat. Would leaders be willing to publicly do that, given what we have seen climbing down on DE&I goals? And I would just say, I think we should. It's the right thing to do, and similar to actually what then Ian has just posted. Hello, Ian. Good to see you again on the chat. That it's not just pharma. It absolutely needs to cut across all sectors, and you know, public, private, NGOs, charities, investors, governments absolutely need to work together. There's been a lot of talk over the years about this. Now it's really about scaling up activities, and actually in some ways some of the political changes and reductions in aid to certain governmental organizations, actually I see that as an opportunity for the private sector to step up and step in and partner with the likes of the World Health Organization and other large groups that perhaps in the past haven't been so willing to partner with private organizations, and now those doors seem to be opening up. So in some ways it is an opportunity. It's not easy. But I think starting with each and every one of our own roles, we can take a long, hard look at what we're doing. And I really like the hashtag quotes, "Be more Greta," and yeah, I think that's a nice phrase to end on. But any final comments from the panel before we hand over to Paul to close the meeting?
Just a big thank you to Inpatient Health for making this a talking point and to have the guts to put this on the agenda and call a group of people together. I think now we've reached a very important milestone, and there's no way back. Hopefully, in due course, we can gather again to talk about what happened since, what realizations, what opportunities, what actions, what results even, and how did we work together, health systems and pharma, clinicians and medical affairs leaders, and every combination possible, because we can do this together, but we need to find each other, learn the language, find the common goals, and then act together.
Yeah, I would say as a sort of representative of the pharma supply chain as well, from the Medcoms perspective, if you are a Medcoms professionals, then challenge your clients and ask the challenging questions about this topic, and look for those opportunities through an ESG lens. Don't know whether Emma wants to throw something out about Mosaic as well, in terms of action and not doing this alone with a peer group.
Exactly. I think there's the importance of coming together as peer network so that we can support each other, because honestly, it's not easy to do this work, and it's certainly not easy to do it alone. So just encourage you to have a look at the materials with regards to Mosaic, and get in touch with Elena if you would like to join us.
And I'd just add that I think it is uncomfortable, like being in a space that's evolving. We don't know quite what to do. As Emma was saying, it can be lonely work. So yeah, absolutely connecting with each other and being willing to challenge the status quo and think differently is part of what we're doing.
Wonderful, thank you. So whilst Greta may have lit a fire under this topic, maybe we've lit a little match in the pharmaceutical industry to actually spark some more conversations. And I feel this time has rushed by, but we've had some really good discussions, and it seems from the poll that there's a desire to continue these conversations and actually come together as an industry and actually chart a path forward. And Mosaic, a great group of medical affairs leaders striving in the space for climate and health. And I think there's open doors to actually expand that group and expand the conversation. Thank you again to Paul and Inpatient Health. I'm going to hand back to you now, Paul, to close the webinar, and thank everybody in the chat for the engagement, and look forward to continuing the partnership.
Thank you to you too, Drew. You did a great chairing job. I think my job is now under threat, so thank you for that. But obviously, massive thanks to the panel for the energy, ideas, and motivation I think that you have given us all. I think that if you haven't already signed up to the Mosaic, or you're not about to, then I think you're missing a huge trick. The whole point of today's session was to show that we don't have to act alone. You are not alone. By being here, you are not an isolated voice in any sense of the word. And it is only through working together that not only will we actually have a result, but we will also believe that we can have a result, because we can see the actual scale of impact actually becoming a reality. And let's be honest with you, one company, even as forthright and talented as Bayer is, for example, is only one in a sea of pharma companies. So I wouldn't just say challenge the people, external stakeholders. I think you do need to channel your internal stakeholders as well, and maybe make them aware of initiatives like Mosaic. I, for one, would be very happy to make this event, for example, an annual gathering so we can hold each other accountable. How will we have done by this time in 2026, everyone? Well, maybe you should watch this space, and we will indeed be willing to hold ourselves accountable to that. So please do make sure that you do that. I don't want to keep you any longer. We have hit the hour, but I do recognize that you have dedicated an important moment of your time to this. Please don't climb down at this point. Please keep the fire burning, the metaphorical one if possible, please, and ensure that we don't let anyone get away with mediocrity on this topic, as has been highlighted by the panel. It is a genuine health issue. There are patients in the audience who have highlighted that they are suffering as a result of this. And of course, maybe it's something that our industry finally could show leadership in. Maybe it's something that we can be ahead of the curve on for once in our lives. I think it'd be something we'd be very, very proud of at the end of our careers. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you panel once again. It's been a pleasure, and sign up for the next thing. Who knows what's coming, but certainly Greta et al. Will hold us to account. I'll speak to you all soon. Thanks a lot.